It's time. What time? It's okay, it's 10 o'clock no. It's time for another episode of the MMA Vivisection. I confused myself for a second there. I thought I had a track that I was gonna go on, and then I lost. So I decided to just jump back up. Anyway, we're here for another MMA Vivisection. This is UFC 202. McGregor Diaz versus I keep saying McGregor versus Diaz 2, but it's Diaz versus McGregor 2.
That result changes everything, man.
It does. Diaz versus McGregor 2 going down this weekend, this Saturday in Las Vegas, Nevada, and on pay-per-view. On what should be, it should be a really fun pay-per-view card and an okay prelim card with a couple of bright spots.
Yeah, there aren't really any letdowns from an action perspective here. I think if there's any fight that probably won't be fun, it might be the Colby Covington fight because he might just blanket his opponent. But even then, he's a very technical grappler, and that can be entertaining to watch. Everything else, it's mostly action fights, and that's the thing I think is really important about this is that even if it hadn't been Conor McGregor, this big superstar who lost to a short notice replacement opponent, even if they weren't two such charismatic fighters, the first fight between Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, although back then it was Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, it was just a fun-ass fight. It was very entertaining. And so even if that was the only thing that was good about it, it would be worth holding this rematch. The fact that now we have water bottle snowball fights taking place at press conferences and Conor McGregor potentially having an opponent who maybe is getting in his head, but also Conor McGregor being more dedicated to specifics of his training and trying to kind of overcome the limitations of a style matchup, all of that just makes it super compelling. So quite frankly, and I very rarely say this with MMA cards, this whole preliminary card could be garbage, and I would be okay with it because I am very, very excited about Diaz McGregor too.
Yeah, it's true. It really is. And there are some fights on this undercard that I think will be absolute trash, but they may be entertaining trash. It may be Freddie Serrano versus Ryan Benoit trash.
The first heavyweight fight in flyweight history. Yes, I recall.
Exactly. That was some extremely entertaining trash.
Well, speaking of entertaining trash, the first fight in the prelims is a middleweight fight.
It's true. So we should probably just dive right in on that segue. I was going to actually introduce you because I forgot, but people watch the show going on.
I'm Conor Rebush.
Yeah,
it's time.
He does some other shit. You know him. You've read him. You've heard him. Whatever. He's here. But let's go right to a featherweight fight, if ever there was one. Alberto Uda versus Marvin Vettori. Conor, what are your thoughts on this fight?
This is actually a very difficult fight to call because both of these guys are guys with a lot of limitations. Marvin Vettori, young, he has all the makings of a very good future fighter. He's young and much like Joe Gigliotti, who got destroyed by Trevor Smith because middleweight. I think, by the way, there's not a lot to say about this fight, so I will just make a brief aside and say I think it's actually uniquely difficult to get going as a young fighter in middleweight because everyone is journeyman, the whole division. There are very few random novices or professional opponents. Most of these guys are win-loss against other people at their own skill level with a few fights against the top of the division. So everyone is super experienced and tough. Even the guys that don't seem that good are a lot tougher than you might get in other divisions where they're getting blown out because the top of the division is so talented. That being said, I think that Alberto Uda, he's got one UFC fight, but he got beaten up by Jake Collier after a little bit of early success. And his style is just a little too wonky, I think, to be reliable. It's all clinch and kicks on the feet with no boxing, not a lot of footwork or movement. And not a lot of defense. And then on the ground, he's all right from top position, pretty good, very static from the bottom. Marvin Vettori, I think, is just more aggressive, more dynamic. He is a scrambler in every sense of the word. He basically is always going to look for a way to finish the fight no matter what the position. He's pretty good everywhere. So I'm going to go with the well-roundedness of Vettori. But, that being said, I would not at all be surprised if Alberto Uda knocked him out in the first round. It could totally happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing, Uda really, I remember scouting him, and he was basically just he's got like a triangle guard game, triangle armbar guard game, and clinch fighting, and that's it. Every other part doesn't exist. In his top game, which, he's active from top, but he gives up position almost instantly. Like, he's the kind of dude who will, from mount, just roll over onto his back to try to hit a triangle. You're like,
how long has he been a Nova União fighter? Because it's almost shocking to see Dede Pederneiras in his corner looking at his skill set. It's not a Nova União skill set.
I have no idea, but it may be, too, the kind of thing where he started late in MMA with them, so he already had a bunch of a bunch of training at other gyms that he picked up, and then he's brought it to Nova União as a skill set that he's developing. So anyway, either way, the big thing to me that stood out is that he just kind of got out-toughed and out-horsed by Jake Collier, and Collier is tough-ish, but he's not, like, if Jake Collier is, like, the better athlete in the cage between you two, then you probably have some major problems to run into. And Vettori is a pretty good athlete. He's at King's MMA, which I expect to channel his aggression into functional striking over time. Because he's very aggressive. He's just a really wooden striker, not to date. So, but Uda's heavy reliance on clinch offense should mean that he gives Vettori a lot of opportunities to just walk him down and to go into the clinch. I'm going to pick, I guess I can't pick Uda by finish. I don't know that he's got necessarily quite the finishing tools for the UFC. And if he's not going to finish somebody early at the pace he fights at, I think he'll probably just kind of fall apart again like he did against Collier, and I trust Vettori to be there to pick up the pieces when he does. So I'll take Vettori too. But Uda, he does work at a high rate, and he is aggressive in the clinch early, so there's a chance he could get an early knockout.
Yep.
Odds on this fight, let's see. Vettori is the favorite going in, -150 down to -175. Uda, the underdog, +153 down to +120. That feels right to me. I mean, just along athletic lines, I think that's reasonable from what we saw out of Uda in his first fight. That brings us to a welterweight bout between Colby Covington and Max Griffin. Now, you referenced a little bit ago that this could be a boring fight. I will say personally, I like watching a dude like Colby Covington wrestle. I think that he's got a really fun, active wrestling game. He's, constantly changing angles, constantly looking for openings, moving well with an opponent. And I just kind of expect this to be a lot like his Jonathan Munir fight, where, except in this point, he's got somebody in Griffin who Munir wanted to wrestle with him. Griffin won't, but Griffin has a really bad habit of just charging in blind, which should set him up perfectly for a takedown from wrestling at the level of Covington. Griffin's takedown defense has been decent when he's fought regional dudes, but they don't wrestle like Covington does, and he just relies, everything is pure athleticism with Griffin. He's got a terrible habit of giving up his back in a scramble as he's getting taken down, and I think that probably ends up with him getting choked out somewhere in the maybe first-ish round. I mean, Covington's not necessarily a great early finisher, so it might be third, but either way, I'm kind of expecting Covington to have his way with it.
Yeah, it's not so much that I think wrestling and grappling are boring, but that on a card that is mostly back and forth looking matchups, this one will be dominant. And dominance, unless it's a special brand or a really celebrated fighter, is rarely that fun to watch. And I do think Colby Covington is going to dominate Max Griffin. Max Griffin reminds me of Abel Trujillo back in his trilogy with Roger Bowling days, with worse wrestling. Like, that's Max Griffin.
And worse striking fundamentals in combination.
Yeah. Kind of stiff, very powerful, knows he's powerful, and really relies on that. And there's very little else to his game. Everything he tries to make up for all the gaps in his wrestling and grappling technique and his striking technique with just being bigger and stronger and more powerful than his opponent. And I think that kind of thing is going to fall flat against Colby Covington. Griffin's the kind of puncher that he could absolutely catch Covington with something, but it's pretty unlikely. Covington's pretty durable. He isn't completely lost on a feet, and he is one of the most relentless wrestlers in MMA today that I know of. He goes after people just nonstop, takedown after takedown, constantly chaining his attacks, constantly making you work. And he does go for the submission. I like what you said about a third-round submission. I don't think Covington's that aggressive of a finisher that he's going to get Griffin out of there, and Griffin is strong enough to probably hold him off. But I do think Covington will probably wrap up his neck before the 15 minutes are through.
Yeah, it doesn't help Griffin's case either that for a dude that's really reliant on having a big athletic advantage over opponents. Like, I think he could get wins in the UFC in fights where he's just a much better athlete. Mm-hmm. I can easily see Griffin getting wins because he's the kind of dude that can knock somebody out with an arm punch going backwards. Mm-hmm. But relying on being the better athlete, then you face somebody like Colby Covington. It's like he's every bit as good an athlete as you. And
absolutely.
Much, much more skilled in
Max Griffin and Mike Perry should fight next.
Yeah, I would be cool with that.
It makes all the sense in the world.
It does. Let's see. Odds on this fight. Covington is the heavy favorite, reasonably heavy favorite, minus 285 to minus 345, 350, actually. And Griffin, the underdog, plus 294 to plus 225 or 220, it looks like. And I'm almost wondering if that's just a little hesitation because people just aren't that into Covington. Like, they don't seem to really like him or his style yet. And otherwise, like, I almost think like minus 285 for Covington. I mean, I don't know. Griffin could catch him, but this feels more like a minus 500 fight to me, you know?
I'm seeing Covington at like minus 345.
Yeah, 285 to 345. Or 350.
I don't see a 285 among my odds.
Oh, maybe I need to I just opened this. How long have you had it open? Oh, no, it just shifted up to minus 300. So those odds are climbing in a hurry.
I think once you're in a 300, it's probably not worth it, even though Covington's not that amazing that he couldn't possibly get knocked out or stopped at some random point.
True.
He got submitted in an instant by Worley Alves, who we have since seen is not an amazing tactician.
No, but yeah, it's true. Okay, fair enough. Let's move on. Neil Magny versus Lorenz Larkin. Much better fight to talk about.
Yeah, this is a fantastic fight. Continuing the UFC's now very strong trend of putting spectacularly good hardcore fights in the featured slot on the Fight Pass prelims, which I don't mind. I think fighters, you get less eyeballs on you as a fighter, but you also get like specialized promotion from the UFC. You get to like be featured on Embedded and series like that if you're in this slot. So it's a mixed bag. I think fighters are going to start appreciating this slot more and not just seeing Fight Pass as like, oh, the dark prelims. This one is actually a very tough fight for me to call. I think Lorenz Larkin has steadily made small improvements since just before his drop to welterweight. He had a lot of problems that sort of haunted him for years. Getting backed into the fence, which was actually most of the problems. That was the root of it. Getting backed into the fence is that. Larkin,
well, he also was always like he's either punching or he's defending punches. He could never do both.
That is very true. He's so in stages. We have small improvements from Larkin. First, he comes down to welterweight. He looks a little better against a guy like Santiago Ponzinibbio, who looked amazing against Zach Cummings, by the way, better than ever. Yeah. Ponzinibbio is a good pressure fighter, and Larkin managed to move a little bit better off the fence and around. He was a little better at countering. He still got stuck there quite a bit, but then in his next fight, he was even better at making sure he wasn't stuck on the fence. By the time he fought Jorge Masvidal, I thought he looked pretty good at it. The biggest improvement I saw against Masvidal, which is something that troubled him in the Tumanov fight, is that Larkin looked more comfortable in the pocket. In fact, he came into that fight anticipating that he could press Masvidal with boxing in short range, and it was like night and day between the Tumenov fight and that one. Because when Tumenov was throwing punches at Larkin, he was freaking out. He was losing his mind. He was flinching. He was closing his eyes. He was leaning away. He couldn't counter effectively. So it was really just his kicks versus Tumenov's boxing. When he fought Masvidal, he was so much more capable of putting it all together because he looked like overnight he had just developed comfort in the pocket. He must have done a good amount of sparring with good boxers or something, but he was standing in there. He was trading punches. He looked all right. He looked pretty good. I think that might actually give him the edge over Neil Magny. Neil Magny has really dominated a lot of fighters on the ground and in the clinch. I have never actually been that impressed with Neil Magny's range striking game, and he is always lackluster in the pocket. That is something that has troubled him consistently. Even when he fights a striker as like raw as Hyun Lim, he gets hurt and he has to shell up. It's basically long range or it's the clinch for Magny as far as striking goes. And when he gets caught between those two, he's uncomfortable, and he's not all that comfortable at long range. He's certainly more comfortable there. But like it's not like he has a nuanced boxing game. Does a lot of pawing and reaching. Doesn't really make the opponent respect his jab. Also gets back into the fence a little too easily. I think Larkin has never actually been all that easy to take down. He wrestled very effectively against Masvidal and popped back up every time he was taken down. And I don't think he is going to go into the clinch against Magny the way other fighters have. I think Larkin's going to know that he is the better striker, whether in the pocket or at long range. More powerful, more diverse, a lot faster, and more technical. And I think he's going to press that advantage. He will very likely have a difficult round, probably round 3, because Magny is such a great comeback artist. But I think that Larkin is going to hurt him a few times in the first 2 rounds. I'm thinking Larkin like maybe late second round or third round TKO might even be a possibility.
Yeah, this is really splitting hairs for me. I agree. I think the big reason is just like you look at the fight, like the ways in which Larkin has struggled, and a lot of it is to like big athletes that can find ways to control him, especially who can find ways to, like I think of that Derek Brunson fight, and all Brunson had to do the whole fight was throw a couple of big overhands at Larkin, which made him shell up, and then the moment Larkin shelled up, take him down.
Yeah. Shell up and just fling himself into the cage.
Yeah. And so part of me then sees somebody like Magny and thinks, Magny is very capable of doing that. He has he's got a very lean himself into the clinch and then cage wrestle and take guys down. He's a very willing wrestler and grappler. He's a more willing wrestler and grappler than he's always been a good grappler, but he's not terrible at it. The other part, mad guys he not even lost to, but had very close fights to, because the only guy he's lost to recently is Damian Maia. But the guys he's had these really close fights with, Kelvin Gastelum, Eric Silva, and then, almost getting blasted out by Hyun Lim and Hector Lombard, they tend to be very flashy, powerful athletes. Like, guys who have a lot of athletic, quick trigger ability are probably going to hurt Neil Magny, or are probably going to outwork him for a little while somewhere. And so the question is then, is Lorenz Larkin a more consistent fighter at this point in his career than Gastelum? Or, he's more consistent than Eric Silva, but is he more consistent than Kelvin Gastelum? Like, that's kind of the question to me. Because Kelvin Gastelum almost had that fight. He came very close, but he just gave away too much and too many minutes to Magny, who's always going to come after you and be consistent, who's always
And Larkin may be uniquely prepared for that because Gastelum's big issue, I think, is that he had never fought someone so much longer and taller than him. It wasn't so much that Magny was hurting him a lot at range, but that Gastelum got in his own head. He's still, we forget this, but he's still an inexperienced fighter, and it really seemed to affect him. Lorenz Larkin used to fight at light heavyweight. The guy is used to fighting bigger men.
It's true, but he's also, like we saw talking about with the Tumanov fight, he is very able to get into his own head as well.
True.
And that's the tough thing for me, is that Larkin has a lot of that in him. He's got that inconsistency in him where he can be forced into these fights where he fights worse than he should. And it's partially due to technical gaps, and it's just partially due to his own attitude. And
I think, to me, it seems like Lorenz Larkin may be entering that space we've talked about before, the Edson Barboza space, where we have seen so much of Lorenz Larkin, it kind of didn't dawn on us that he may not have hit his prime yet. He's 29.
Yep.
He has just now basically entered his 7th year of fighting. So it kind of makes sense that right now he should be hitting his stride. Right now he should be at his best. And it looks like that. Judging by his fights, it looks like he's better than he was before. My feeling is that if Hector Lombard can close the distance and hurt you with a shot, Lorenz Larkin can probably do it better, and he's not going to gas out trying to kill you in the first round.
Yeah, that's... Yeah. My other fear is just that Magny's going to find a way to just out-wrestle Lorenz Larkin for a while.
And that was what really surprised me in the Gastelum fight, is how easily Magny out-wrestled him. Like, he is a very tricky clinch fighter and very, very good on the ground, which, by the way, makes me fear Damian Maia like the plague.
Yeah, I'm going to actually go with Magny. I think the thing here pushing me is that I think that Magny's a three-dimensional enough fighter and that he's going to get those opportunities where Larkin opens himself up, where Larkin still makes mistakes, where he still backs himself against the fence, and Magny's going to really capitalize on that in a way that Masvidal probably, in part, couldn't, just because he's not very big. Like, he doesn't have the physical ability to hold somebody down. Whereas Magny is very much more prepared to be this big, blanketing, sort of spider-like entity of arms and legs. So I'm going to take Magny to control just enough of this fight to eke out the split decision.
So the real question is, do you think Magny will lose the first round?
Yeah, probably.
He almost always does.
He almost always does. He almost always loses the first round, but I think he'll win the next two. And I think it'll be a split decision. Like I say, I think it'll probably be like round 2 will be this like 50-50 round where Magny will get takedowns and do some ground and pound and grappling work and get touched up on the feet a little bit. And I don't know.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's just I like his willingness to wrestle and grapple and heavily lean on that. And I think in this fight in particular, that could help him. So
I do want to say, by the way, Covington inside the distance is plus 205. So there is a way to bet on that fight. That is not terrible.
Yeah, actually, that Max Griffin on his day, getting this call up just does not seem ready for it. Like, I don't see anything in Griffin's game other than power that suggests to me that he's going to thrive here in this fight.
Not to sidetrack us too much, but that's a hell of a lot better than minus 300.
It is. Yep. Covington inside the distance at plus 200 is not bad at all. So Lorenz Larkin is the slight underdog, plus 123 to plus 100. Neil Magny, the slight favorite, minus 125 to minus 140. I basically see this as like a dead even fight. Like I say, I'm leaning split decision, and I wouldn't be surprised if it comes up either way with a split decision. Both of these guys, Larkin and Magny, have a habit of going to split decisions. So
I'm not confident enough in Larkin that I would advise you to bet on him straight at plus 120. And I'm definitely not confident enough in a TKO that I would advise you to take the plus 350 line for Larkin by knockout.
Yeah, neither of these guys is like Larkin has these moments of dynamic finishing, but Magny is really stupid tough.
Yeah.
And Magny does not have moments of dynamic finishing. So All right. At that point, let's move on to the Fox Sports 1 card, and the first bout up, Randa Markos versus Cortney Casey. And I'm really, really having trouble getting excited about Cortney Casey, and this coincides with my dwindling excitement for Randa Markos. But I still think that Randa Markos kind of has this fight in the bag. Because so far to date, Cortney Casey's biggest skill has been that she's big and she's a bully. And Markos is pretty big and pretty physically gifted. Like, she's still this random. I don't see any of the technical improvement that I hoped for and expected out of Markos. And that's what gives me the most pause about her. But she's a good wrestler, and I think that a lot of this fight is going to come down to physical, like cage wrestling, and Cortney Casey pulling guard and Markos ending up on top, working her over from there. And I just see Markos taking a decision.
The crazy thing is that with Randa Markos, she had the Kovalkiewicz fight, and that was her last fight so far at TriStar, and she was a little too right-hand happy. Which doesn't seem like a TriStar fighter. Then she went back to Michigan Top Team, which is Darren Cruikshank's gym, and when she fought Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger out of that camp, her jab was very, very present. So I don't know if it took a while for the TriStar lesson to set in, or if she is just more comfortable training out of that environment. But I was actually pretty happy with the performance she had against Lybarger. Did you pick Lybarger to beat her as well?
I don't think I did. No,
I think I did. I kind of recall us both doing it, but maybe I'm thinking of someone else. But I think I picked her because I was like, well, Randa Markos has just fallen apart. That was the first time I saw her where it seemed she had actually made a real technical stride forward. She fought out of this awkward kind of crouch. She was really active with her lead hand.
She was, yeah.
Her footwork was pretty solid. Jocelyn Jones, just in terms of that she was using it. Not that she was clean
my
footwork.
memory of that fight is her off balancing herself all the time and like constantly overreaching and ending up like off balance walking past her opponent. That's like my stark memory of that fight.
I don't remember too much of that. I remember a lot of actually moving after hitting. Not that her footwork was really clean or technical, not that she's an amazing striker, but application wise, she knew when to move. She knew when to throw. She knew how to set up the shots. I thought that was pretty good. It showed some fight IQ growth for her, and that instantly gives her the edge, in my opinion, over Cortney Casey, who had a good moment of her own against Christina Stancio. She didn't pull guard. She took Stancio down and fought from top position, and she did it again when Stancio managed to get up. Very smart, used her strength and her size. I think she still has a lot of potential, but it's still the same woman who blasted Joanne Calderwood and then repeatedly pulled guard. I just find it really hard to trust Cortney Casey in a fight where it's like a back and forth war and she has to make quick split-second decisions. Markos in that Jocelyn Jones-Lybarger fight really gave me hope that she could be an amazing champion, but a good journeywoman in this division going forward. And I think she will be basically a gatekeeper for Casey's continued development. I like Markos by decision.
Yeah, I just have trouble picking Casey, I think, where I don't see her having a major physical advantage.
And even if she does have the same IQ improvement, she's not going to be able to just ragdoll Randa Markos to the ground the way she did Stancio.
She's not fighting a 5'2" Romanian.
Right.
She's
fighting a physical, legitimate strawweight with good wrestling. So It's a tough one for her. Who by the way, does not mind getting hit because she took some corkers from Lybarger in the first part of that fight, and she never blinked once. Markos is tough.
Yeah, she is. No, I like a lot of the basics of what Markos offers as a fighter. I guess I'm waiting for more fluidity to click into her game.
Yeah, well, that's why she inspired hope in the first place, because she came in the Ultimate Fighter. No one knew who she was, and she outperformed. But then I think that set the expectations too high. Like Kelvin Gastelum, it set the expectations a little too high for her, and then it made it even harder because she's just constantly fighting good fighters. I think this is a good fight for her. Lybarger and this are good steps back that allow her to develop.
Yep. So that makes, let's see, the odds on this. Markos is the favorite, -131 to -161. Casey, the underdog, +130 down to +110. I think that's a little narrow. I have not seen anything from Casey yet in her career that suggests that she's a dependable winner. I mean, we've seen one win from her, and it's over somebody that's way smaller than her and off of an MMA scene that is drastically underdeveloped. And otherwise, she got. I mean, even talking about having a massive size slash physical edge, she got beat up by Sohee Ham. And that's somebody who is also like 5'1".
Yeah, and I think with the style that Markos showed against Jones Lieberger, it could be like fighting a bigger, harder hitting Sohee Ham. Maybe not quite as much craft, but Markos throws volume. She's not afraid to stand in the pocket and exchange.
Yep. So I don't really see much to give a lot of faith in Casey. I mean, I'm not saying it should be like 300 or 400 or something here, but I think that Markos is a good bet at like -130.
Sure. Even at -140, I think she's a solid bet. I think she's pretty certain to win this one.
So let's see. That brings us to a featherweight bout. Artem Lobov versus Chris Avila, and I am so happy you get to lead this. Give us
Artem Lobov.
Technical breakdown of this. I want real technical look.
Some hard-hitting analysis. Well, the reason this fight is happening is because it's a scrap pack fighter, Chris Avila, versus an SBG Ireland fighter, Artem Lobov. It's Nate Diaz teammate versus Conor McGregor teammate. I like it. I don't mind. I think it makes perfect sense from a matchmaking perspective. It adds a little more heat to the card. They could have done a whole card where it was like U.S. versus Ireland. That would have been great, like leading into the main card. That
would have been nice. Like I would have loved to see. I really love the idea. This fight is bad.
Well, Artem Lobov, we've talked about it many times. We laugh at him probably more than he deserves because Lobov, he has fought a very tough schedule as far as regional opponents go. He's 11-12, less than a 50% winning rate, but he's always fought good fighters. And he's pretty much only lost to good fighters with a couple of exceptions. He's beaten a few good guys too because he's tough, he hits hard, and he keeps coming. His problems are that despite being the constant training partner of Conor McGregor, he does not seem to make any strategic or technical developments in any really noticeable way from one fight to the next.
Dude, the Conor McGregor camp just learned about game planning this fight. They're
right.
like, oh my God, it's amazing. We can actually plan for an opponent? What the shit is this?
I mean, not to piss anybody off, but I'm going to suggest that perhaps John Kavanagh isn't so much a genius as Conor McGregor is an amazing athlete and a natural fighter, who also takes a lot of his training into his own hands and pursues things that he knows will improve him. So Lobov, I mean, Kavanagh is a jiu-jitsu guy, but Lobov's ground game is bad. He's too easy to take down and too easy to control on the ground. Most of his finish losses, I believe, are submissions. He's a powerful striker on the feet, but has very short arms and doesn't have the footwork to make up for that disadvantage. He tries to draw people in by countering, which often works for shorter guys with small reaches. But he's like, he has two counters. You know what I mean? Like it's an uppercut or it's the hop step cross that McGregor uses. That's basically it. Then again, Chris Avila, I think Avila,
I was going to say, bring us the kicker why you're picking him still.
Yeah, right. Well, I think Avila would beat Artem Lobov if he was more experienced and better at what he wants to do. Like, the way that Avila is being trained to fight is pretty good. It's classic Diaz stuff. It's like Nate Diaz stuff. It's like long range, using his reach, boxing from the outside, and then opportunistic jiu-jitsu. But he's just so raw. He's young. He's inexperienced. He's too easy to back up. Not confident enough in his reach. Not consistent and disciplined enough with his movement. So I think Lobov is probably going to hit him a little more hard than Avila hits him. I don't actually think Lobov's going to knock Avila out. I think it's going to be like a very close fight that leads to a unanimous decision for for the SBG man.
Yeah. I mean,
it's going to be a weird,
too,
scrappy fight, I think.
Avila is the kind like he's 5-2, and his 2 losses, they're not to terrible regional fighters. They're to, decent other rising talents with decent records. But it's not the kind of record that inspires any hope. You don't see like a 5-2 kid starting out and you're like, he's UFC bound. He's already taken decision losses to guys nobody's ever heard of and probably never will. And Lobov, I get the whole he's better than he looks, and man, that record is so tough. But there's still there's a reason dudes go 11-12, and it's not because they're amazing. It's really not. I don't want to be mean. I'm just sick of this whole we really need to love this guy and bank on him being way better than he looks because this record is harder. This path was hard. It's at some point you've also got to be he's not good enough to be here. He has a good chance to give away or lose any fight he's in. And Alex White is probably about close to the worst featherweight in the UFC. No shade on Alex White. He looked way better in that fight.
Alex White fought a smart fight for the first time in his career.
Alex White fought a great fight for the first time in his career, and he destroyed Artem Lobov.
Yeah.
It was not close. It was until the last round when Lobov started landing a couple of big shots. Lobov absolutely just got shit kicked by a dude that I was I have no... Alex White was okay, whatever. He's going to lose a couple of fights, and, he'll fight Makwan Amirkhani, and that'll be a stepping stone for Makwan. And this is just going to be it'll be fun, but it's going to be a complete trash fire because
I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I don't give a fuck. I don't think John Kavanagh is a very good corner man. I think the fact that his only advice for Lobov through that entire fight was that he should step forward when he threw his counters. He didn't give him any strategic adjustments. He didn't tell him how to find the openings he wanted. He didn't. There was no way that Lobov could mix it up. It was just keep doing what you're doing, but step in closer to do it. And Lobov couldn't even do that. It reminded me of when Cathal Pendred, the GOAT, was fighting, and he was who was he fighting, man? Maybe it was John Howard. And he was stuck in the bottom in a bad position, and he looked over, and John Kavanagh was sitting there next to the octagon, and he just looked at Cathal Pendred and said nothing. He had no advice for how to get out of the position. He just watched him. He was literally 5 feet away. He just silently stared at his fighter as he looked desperately for help. I don't think John Kavanagh has a huge understanding of how to guide a fighter through a fight. I'm not sure he has that. And without that, Artem Lobov is just going to be this guy over and over and over and over again. Unfortunately for Chris Avila, I think Artem Lobov can just be that guy and probably just be tough and experienced enough to hit him.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real reason Artem Lobov should lose this fight other than that he's Artem Lobov, and he could lose any fight potentially. So
it's cruel, but it's
I just we're gonna have to talk about CM Punk versus Mickey Gall at some point here soon, and I don't want people to think that I'm gonna I'm not gonna call a bad fight a bad fight.
Wait till CM Punk comes out and just blows us all away with how incredible he is at MMA.
Yeah, I'll wait until that happens. Man, I'm going to be waiting so hard for that. Okay, Chris Avila is the underdog, plus 110 to minus 115. Artem Lobov, the favorite, minus 106 to minus 125. Those are perfect odds. This is a trash fight. They should be close to dead even. Lobov being a very slight favorite is fine, but at his record and the way he fights, that's as good as he should expect.
Yeah, I was almost going to say you might bet on Lobov because I think everyone agrees he's probably going to win, and the odds are so narrow, but it's just not a bettable fight. It's just too weird.
No. All right, let's move on to better things because that fight makes me a little angry. I get it, and I want it to be
okay
fun.
with it. I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it. I'll be okay with it on the night, and I get it, and I want it to be fun. But I don't like. I get so tired of like this greatness by association thing for both guys, where people are gonna be like, "Oh, he's a Diaz dude, so he's gonna be good," or he's got this tough record and it's tougher than it looks. And it's just like, no, just at some point, stop. Just stop and be like, look, these guys aren't very good and they're fighting each other, and that's fine.
I love the notion that because of his association with Conor McGregor, that there are people out there who really consider themselves serious Artem Lobov fans.
I know.
They go into his fights and they're like, he's amazing because he trains with Conor McGregor.
Yes. Okay, so Raquel Pennington, Elizabeth Phillips. Moving on. Raquel Pennington should absolutely win this fight. She's been making the right strides. She looks like she's getting in better shape as her career goes along. She's added more dynamic ability to her game. Like, she's less static than she used to be, and she's still a solid, like, power grinder inside. But, her Betch Kohea fight, she showed a little more dynamic movement, a little better understanding of distance and how to control range and how not to just march into the clinch and try to hit your opponent more than they hit you. Mm-hmm. And Elizabeth Phillips is just kind of bad. It just does not look very good. Doesn't have any real process to her game. She's a scrap pack, or not a scrap pack, but what's the at camp?
Is she a Cesar Gracie fighter?
No, she not a scrap pack, but what's the
Sherdog says sick jitsu.
Yeah, she's a sick jitsu fighter.
Oh, Pena and Chiesa and Cecilia.
Pena and Chiesa and all that. And she kind of has all the typical problems that those fighters have without any of the typical strength, which mostly for those guys is weird athleticism or funky skills that really don't translate. Like, nobody else at sick jitsu wrestles like Michael Chiesa, and Juliana Pena is just kind of a powerhouse.
Yeah. It's a weird camp. It's not really like an identifiable style that comes out of that camp.
No. The only style is that none of them can box. That's the only identifiable style out of sick jitsu.
Yeah.
And so, even against Jessamine Duke, like, Elizabeth Phillips beat Jessamine Duke, but it was a weird, close, back-and-forth fight all the way through where Phillips gave up a ton of position and a ton of control and still outworked Jessamine Duke because Jessamine Duke is not good at all. But Raquel Pennington has shown herself slowly to be molding herself into a pretty decent fighter, and I think she just kind of takes this one through a grinding decision where she does a lot more damage and gets a lot more positions.
Phillips had her moments in a few of her UFC fights now. She's had moments skirting around the outside and letting people walk her down and then just blasting them with haymaker combinations. Uh-huh. She's often the smaller woman. I think she will be here too. And that makes sense. The striking craft in this division is not so good that kind of Artem Lobov approach won't work. People are just going to come in and overcommit. They're not going to measure you and make you lead and stuff like that. So it's all right, but there's not a lot of skill behind it. It's just like alternating punches. And against Jessamine Duke, she really gassed herself out doing it, which is not a good thing. I think her best shot here against Pennington is the ground. Phillips is a very good scrambler. She has often ended up in superior positions on the ground, even when her opponent is the one to take her down. But Pennington is no slouch as a grappler. She has solid takedown defense. If anyone takes anyone down, it'll probably be Pennington, which means she'll wind up on top. Mostly, I think Pennington's going to use her size and physicality. She's going to push the pace more than Phillips can take, and she's going to beat her up against the fence. I like Pennington by decision.
See the odds makers for this fight. Pennington is the favorite, minus 245 to minus 280. And Phillips, the underdog, plus 226 down to plus 185. Feel a little weird saying that might still be a little close on Pennington, but it's not really like bettable. It's not great odds, but it's still like I would be surprised if Pennington lost this. I would not be. I think it'll go to a decision, so I don't think there's a lot of.
Plus, women's bantamweight is one step shy of heavyweight in terms of unbettability.
It's true.
Everything's so unpredictable.
So let's move on then to Cody Garbrandt versus Takeya Mizugaki.
Really solid fight for Garbrandt. He went in there against another puncher and Tomas Almeida. He landed the first big punch. Almeida's sort of willingness to stand close. He came after Garbrandt a bit and got clocked. It worked against him. I think we all knew it was a possibility to fight with two punchers, one of whom has a knack for getting hurt early. And so that's great for Garbrandt. Now he actually gets to fight someone who is an experienced elite fighter. And I think that's a really good move. Mizugaki has been at the top of this game for a very long time. He has pretty much only lost to elite fighters. I think the only exception is Chris Carriaso. That's the only exception. And that's just because Mizugaki, I think, is not always that great at pressing the pace.
Chris Carriaso, to his credit, was a borderline top 15-ish guy for most of his later career. Like, he was never great, but he was never, like, you look at the dudes that beat Carriaso, and it was all, like, very elite dudes.
Yeah, also just as a style matchup, like being a guy who almost exclusively kicks from long range would totally work against Mizugaki, who is a wrestle boxer. So that makes sense. Mizugaki, pretty damn well-rounded, pretty solid everywhere. I think he's actually quite a bit more powerful than he's given credit for. I watch his fights, and he often ends up buzzing his opponents. It's not like he can't punch. I think it's that he's not a good finisher. He's not good at following up and pressing the pace. He often will look for the takedown or tie the person up in the clinch after following with a combination. He doesn't put people away. But Mizugaki, he certainly hits hard enough to earn your respect. He had Francisco Rivera all over the damn place. And that is what I think this fight could be if Mizugaki gets his way. If Garbrandt, as I fear like many punchers he will, starts to love his own power a little too much, if maybe he started to slack off in training, if maybe he goes in there willing to waste his gas tank because he thinks Mizugaki can be put away like everyone else he's ever fought, like McGregor tried to do to Diaz, then he could find himself in hot water here because Mizugaki is tough. He's not easy to knock out. He's not easy to hurt. He's surprisingly crafty in the pocket. He's a solid enough wrestler. And if he gets you down, he will do his best to wear you out and chip away with short shots. He's a good fighter with a lot of high-level experience. So if Garbrandt comes in silly, then I think Mizugaki could beat him. And I think it is a distinct possibility. The way Garbrandt's been talking, like he's now like neck tattoo personified. Like he really thinks he is just the baddest motherfucker in this division. I really think there's probably a reckoning coming for him at some point. I don't know if it comes against Mizugaki, but I can't close the door on the possibility. My pick is Garbrandt by TKO in first or second round, but I wouldn't be shocked to see Mizugaki outsmart him.
Yeah, I think my big reason that I'm actually not as concerned about that is that I feel like if we were going to see that, we would have seen it. Like most of the punchers in MMA, at least, who really fall in love with their own power, a lot of them tend to kind of start, well, because we don't get a lot of really technical strikers, perhaps this is part of it too, is a lot of them tend to start out as power brawlers who survived on their own power to start and who then, like, even as they become more technical fighters, still have that power brawler mentality. Like, that's always been Francisco Rivera's thing, is that he started out as, like, this just, I'm going to go in there and put hands on you kind of dude. And as he became a more technical striker, he never really knew how to actually marry that to having the power that he always did.
I'm talking about guys like Conor McGregor, who start off as very technical guys. They're kind of the boxer-puncher types who start to get it into their head that they don't have to be boxer punchers. They can just be punchers and still win. Because every single person they fight, no matter how much harder the opposition gets, they go away. And I thought it was very encouraging that Garbrandt didn't have that moment against Briones. Henry Briones wouldn't go away, and Garbrandt settled down and won the decision pretty clearly. But it happens. It's a thing that happens in waves. You know what I mean? Like when a fighter is developing, you grow overconfident and then you have your confidence shattered. And then 2 fights later, you're way overconfident again. It's very difficult to manage that boldness that comes with just like defeating another man in single combat. So I at some point I think it'll probably happen again for Garbrandt, or it will happen in a big way.
Yeah, I guess for me though, the more important, the thing I'm more worried about with that Briones fight and with the potential Mizugaki fight is that if Garbrandt fights that kind of really relaxed pace against Mizugaki, Mizugaki works a lot harder and would do a lot more to, trouble Garbrandt, to push him against the cage, to make him actually fight takedowns continuously, and to, if he gets on the ground, make him grapple. I mean, Mizugaki's a pretty good controlling wrestle grappler when he gets the opportunity. And I'm still picking Garbrandt because I think that his combination of like the hands low, stuff the takedown boxing with the sharpness and power he has and his footwork will keep him safe enough to find opportunities against somebody like Mizugaki, who's just not a finisher, who's very unlikely to finish him. Mizugaki, even as you say, I think the biggest reason that he has the power to buzz people is really that he's pretty accurate and reasonably slick and fast with his hands. Mm-hmm. Like when he hits you, if he's going to hit you, he'll usually hit you really clean and right on the chin. And it's just then that, like you say, he's almost 3-dimensional for his own good, where it's like he'll land a clean, 3-punch combo that stuns somebody and then immediately shoot for the takedown. And it's like, oh, you didn't have to do that. You could have just, stayed in the pocket and wailed on them. Mm-hmm. But he's just, there's very little of Mizugaki as a great finisher, honestly, especially in recent history.
Yep.
And if he's not going to finish Garbrandt, and if he's going to give him a lot of opportunities, I think at this stage in Mizugaki's career, it's a lot more likely that Garbrandt finishes him. So I do think it's the right step up. It's a seasoned, well-rounded veteran that can make Garbrandt have to work everywhere, but isn't going to put him away. And
if Garbrandt is lucky, he'll have a tough round and have to learn his lesson mid-fight and calm down, and if he does come into this overconfident. Because I think if now he goes in there and he destroys Mizugaki, with each win like that, it becomes more likely that he's going to have a fall. And you don't want that fall to come when you get your shot against Dominic Cruz, You don't want to go in against Cruz and be like, I can knock this full out easily, and go in there unprepared and just get completely owned by one of the best fighters in the world.
It's true. No, nobody wants to be John Moraga versus Demetrius Johnson.
And even John Moraga went into that fight and had the right idea. He just couldn't pull it off.
Yeah.
I'm saying, you don't want to enter into a fight with the best guy you've ever fought at your most overconfident. You want to go into that fight with a really solid idea of what you should do to beat this guy. You want to have belief, but you don't want to go in there against the best guy you've ever fought thinking this is going to be easy. It's true.
And I think I will worry more about that when I've seen it in the cage from Garbrandt.
Yeah. Fortunately, it hasn't occurred.
Yeah, because we have now seen it in the cage from Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
Where he walked into the toughest fight with the most unreasonable amount of confidence and failed miserably. But anyway,
he didn't expect it to be the toughest fight. At the very least,
no.
He has that excuse. So we don't know if he takes Diaz as seriously as he should have if it's a different fight. We will know this weekend.
Yeah, we will know. So the odds on this fight, let's see. Cody Garbrandt is the favorite, -493 to -600. Takeya Mizugaki, the underdog, +472 to +350. And it looks like the odds makers are feeling Cody Garbrandt's overconfidence, I would say.
I think Mizugaki's worth a small bet at those odds.
Yeah, a chance bet.
Yeah.
Just because Mizugaki is a very capable grinder. He is very capable of getting in there and getting in your face and making a fight really tough on you for 3 rounds and stealing it away, Mm-hmm.
And it's not like Cody Garbrandt, even at his best, is an amazingly slick technical fighter. He still has gaps in his game. Not a great defensive fighter, so there's openings.
Yeah, I expect Garbrandt to win. I'm picking him to win, but there's a chance opportunity. If Garbrandt can't hurt Mizugaki somehow, then becomes a very interesting fight.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think he can fight like he did against Henry Briones and win necessarily. Like, that was a really lackluster performance against somebody that did not have many offensive tools to offer him. And that brings us to now the pay-per-view card. And first fight up, Tim Means versus Sabah Homasi. And this is an interesting fight. I'm very much of the belief that Will win it. He's more diverse. He's more capable. He's got a better clinch game. He's a very solid outside technical boxer. And he's got great power. I think he's just got too many of the edges in the same ways, places that Homasi expects to succeed, as Homasi is very much a power kickboxer who does not work at a great rate. I think that Means can just, Means isn't going to go away easily, and then he can use his own basically all of his experience with how to push pace and how to change the fight and change where the fight's happening to make Homasi uncomfortable. I don't know that I'm actually going to pick Means to stop him. I think that this could be exactly the kind of fight where Means doesn't get an easy stoppage win, something more like his Marcio Alejandro Jr. fight or Hernani Perpetuo fights. So I expect Homasi could hang around, but I think Means just... the weight of experience has me picking Means here, and Homasi's own ability to lose fights to random dudes.
Yeah, and it's not just the experience, it's also what we've learned from that experience. Tim Means has never been legitimately knocked out. He had an injury TKO very early in his career, and he's been submitted a few times, but that's not Sabah Homasi's thing. He's a knockout puncher, and more importantly, he is a live and die by the sword kind of fighter. He knocks people out. He has finished in 10 of his 11 wins, and he gets knocked out or submitted. He's been finished in 4 of his 5 losses. Whatever the result, favoring Homasi or not, it tends to be a finish. And so I just think Tim Means is going to go in there and just be a little cleaner, a little more durable. Tim Means, with his build, has the opportunity to use his reach to his advantage. He can also mix it up with Homasi in the clinch and beat him up inside. And he can go to a submission game if need be. So I like Tim Means.
The only thing I'm worried about a little bit is reading an interview that Means did just the other day, where he's like, I used to wrestle a lot in this camp. I really am getting back to my wrestling. I'm really going to try and focus and push like more wrestling in this fight right now. And Means may not be a bad wrestler, but it kind of has me a little bit worried of that, like, what's his name?
Darren Cruikshank?
Not Darren Cruikshank, actually. I'm thinking more of the not Zach Cummings, but Patrick Cummins, where he's fighting Little Nog, and he's like, I'm really not going to wrestle as much this time out. I really want to like be less aggressive and push on my boxing more. And it's just like, is that really a good idea? Do you really want to like actually make a big change in what has been successful for you throughout your entire career? Maybe. I don't know. I worry that Means could be setting himself up to like shoot from too far out a few times and get stuffed and suddenly like have these plans that he's been working on so carefully for the past few months just fall apart on him. So, but that aside, that's not a real legit fear. It's just a small fear I have whenever fighters start talking about changing their whole process. That always makes me a little unwary. But
sorry I didn't chuckle at the end of your Patrick Cummins anecdote. I dropped out right in the middle of it. The screen froze. So, but I know exactly what you were saying.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm picking Means still very solidly. I expect him to win, but I am a little concerned that if he just decides, I'm going to evolve a whole new part of my game, that'll be like, that's not really what you should do. You have a game that works pretty well and has probably gotten you about as far as you're going to get. Yeah. But that's also a little bit of a, that's the dispassionate, slightly negative side of me saying that. So
it means it's always fun to watch, man. Like
Yeah.
he's always a good fun fighter. Homasi, I think, no matter what happens, is gonna make him work. So it should be a fun fight at the very least.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun fight, definitely. Homasi is definitely an underdog in this fight, plus 375 to plus 285. Tim Means, the favorite, minus 400 to minus 475. That's maybe a little far out, honestly, but probably not. Like my only worry with Means is that, like, he has the ability to be the dude that. Well, I guess he hasn't lost to anybody bad in a long time. I was gonna say he has the ability to be that dude that drops fights to fighters that aren't that great. But the truth is that his recent losses are Matt Brown, Neil Magny, Jorge Masvidal, and Danny Castillo, which none of them look anything remotely similar to Sabah Homasi, who looks a lot more like the Marcial Alejandro Jr., Hernani Perpetuo, Diego Lima, George Sullivan dudes that Means has beat.
I think George Sullivan's a pretty good comparison, actually.
Yeah, the reason I'm not picking Means to finish, even though, as you say, Homasi is a live by the sword, die by the sword fighter, is that he's more patient than Sullivan, who tends to be much more of a weighed-in brawler.
Yeah.
And really gave Means everything he wanted. I think Homasi tends to sit back a lot more and try to pick his spots and could just slowly lose a points war. Anyway, that brings us to Hyun Lim versus Mike Perry. And take it away.
This is a weird main card fight. It's just so strange. How did Mike Perry get here? Who saw Mike Perry fighting and thought this guy needs to fight in the UFC?
My only thought is that it's the same process that whoever got Alex Nicholson here too. Like
Alex Nicholson's at middleweight now, and he's a very valuable contribution to that division at the very least. Welterweight is already stacked. Mike Perry is going to have a nightmare of a time making his style work at welterweight. He has the makings of a good fighter. He's very athletic. He's really powerful, but he is so raw. So raw. That's just the real problem here. Hyun Lim is not a great fighter. He's really reckless. He's wide open to be hit, but he's durable and he flows because he's been doing this for some time. He hasn't taken away from his experience that he should do things differently, but he knows how to do what he does pretty well. Mike Perry is kind of Hyun Lim's style, but stiff and kind of awkward. Like, he throws heavy punches, but unlike Lim, they're mostly single shots. And unlike Lim, he doesn't mix in the knees and the kicks the same way. He was finished in his last fight, by the way. Mike Perry fought a guy named David Mundell, who is not a terrible fighter, but significantly smaller and probably not as powerful as Perry. And Mundell hurt him badly in the first round and then knocked him out at the end of the first round, and the bell rang just as he landed the punch. And then Perry impressively came back to finish Mundell, but like, that's not the kind of thing I want to see from you if you're fighting Hyun Lim and your only chance is to knock him out with a power shot. So, yeah, Max Griffin and Mike Perry is the fight to make after this card because they're both probably going to lose, and they're both fairly similar. Perry has potential, but I haven't seen any of it tapped into yet, and Hyun Lim is just a bigger, better version of him.
Yeah, Perry is the kind of dude that I really hope desperately gets to a better camp after this ASAP, because he's training, like I say, he's training with Alex Nicholson.
Oh, is he?
They are training partners at the UFC gym out in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Nicholson, I believe, co-owns, or like Nicholson's dad owns that UFC gym. And that's...
This story is just... Mike Perry's training camp takes place in a UFC gym that Alex Nicholson's dad owns.
Yeah, I believe that's the truth. He also spent some time at ATT Orlando doing grappling, but that's his striking style, like you can see in his striking style, like he's got this really nice fundamental base of a stiff jab and a wide base, which I'm happy. I like. Great, something to build off of. But every now and then he throws in that spinning back fist. I'm like, oh, you're training with Alex Nicholson. I see it now.
Yeah.
And he looks like a great athlete. He looks like he has very little MMA experience, and he looks like he will absolutely get knocked out badly by him.
It's like Alex Nicholson if Alex Nicholson wasn't comfortable in the cage.
Yeah.
Like Nicholson is like loopy and moves around. He's cool with getting hit. He's cool with trying to walk you into shit. Mike Perry is like, he's like tensing up and throwing single shots and worried that you're going to counter him. He's just raw. Like there's nothing, we're laughing at the guy and it's unfair because he's very inexperienced, but like he's getting put in there against Hyun-Gyu Lim. Like you either have to laugh or cry because it's.
Yeah, Hyun-Gyu Lim typifies what I like to call the power monster fighter.
Yeah.
Like Hyun-Gyu Lim, Brandon Thatch, and Eric Silva, dudes like that. We've also Abel Trujillo. Mm-hmm. These dudes that have like this massive amount of killer power that they know how to apply in these very particular ways. And then, they have the complete ability to explode and fall apart. They're very much like, they're like level bosses in a video game. But they're like the level boss that kills you 5 times until you figure out how to beat that boss. Yeah,
all you have to do is wait for Hyun-Gyu Lim to open his third eye and it blinks red. That's all you have to do.
Exactly. And, Mike Perry he's your first try. He's your first run at this boss where you just get stomped in 20 seconds and you're like, fuck.
Mike Perry needs to grind against some mobs. You know what I mean? Like Mike Perry hasn't leveled up enough for this boss just yet.
He really needs to do some grinding seriously. So,
by the way, the bet to make in this fight, because it wouldn't actually be that crazy if Mike Perry knocked out Hyun-Gyu Lim, because he hits really hard and Lim is there to be hit. And we know Perry can recuperate from being hurt, at least if he has a bell to save him. But I think the pick to make in this fight is that it ends in less than a round and a half.
Yeah, under a round and a half, minus 110.
I think that's a pretty good value.
Yeah. Otherwise, so the odds on this fight, actually, I'm cold bet on Hyun-Gyu Lim. Well, I guess he's like you say, Mike Perry could knock him out, but Hyun-Gyu Lim is the favorite, minus 259 to minus 280. Mike Perry.
That's not that bad. That's not that bad.
No.
This is such a weird fight. How is this in the middle of the main card for this event?
I don't know. Mike Perry plus 250 to plus 210, and I really would be really surprised if Perry does not get knocked out cold. Like, he's so wooden and stiff and low volume that it's just set up for a massive flying knee from Hyun-Gyu Lim. So, all right, it's just worth knowing out there that's out there. And that brings us to the first of the great part of the pay-per-view card, welterweight bout, Rick Story versus Donald Cerrone. And this is just a good fight. Like, I'm really excited about this fight because both these guys, like Rick Story looked every bit like he hadn't lost a step coming back after 2 years on the sidelines. Just came right back in, fought Tarek Safadine, looked every bit like the Rick Story that I love. Also, weirdly, the Rick Story that people are like, oh, Rick Story's so boring, when he's landing like 250 body punches, and I'm like, what? I don't understand. What do you want from this man?
He's a fun grinder, man. There are grinders that are entertaining, and Rick Story is one of them.
Yeah, like I mean, and partially this is me. I love Darren Elkins, so obviously I've got a soft spot for these grinders. But Rick Story is like 50% more exciting than Darren Elkins.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, Rick Story is a fun ass dude to watch fight. He's gonna pin you against the cage, and he's gonna throw body shots until you pee blood. And great.
Story versus Nelson was legitimately one of the best fights of 2014. By the way, that was a very good fight.
Yeah, and Donald Cerrone, on the other hand, has become a much craftier kickboxer with better footwork, who probably still can't take much in the way of punches to the body.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me really want to pick Story here, and I feel like I should, but Donald Cerrone's looked so good lately. I'm going to pick Story just based on this body punch dynamic, and I think that Story is so stupid tough that I think he can walk through whatever Donald Cerrone throws at him and get enough shots in that Donald Cerrone, this is a dude who's had half his stomach removed. Donald Cerrone's body punching problems are, they may just be, medical at this point.
Like Matt Brown with his history of drug abuse and therefore his shriveled black liver that can't take a shot.
Exactly. That may just be what Donald Cerrone's working with at this point in his life.
Yeah.
And I don't see this the Patrick Cote thing where I don't see Donald Cerrone taking Story down and just putting a grappling class on him.
Yeah.
So I'm picking Story here, maybe even by body TKO.
I really like that Donald Cerrone is still getting better. It would be so easy for a guy like him to just settle into his style, and I think for a lot of years he did. But shout out to Brandon Gibson, who I think the time that he's been putting in with Cerrone, now that Cerrone is working with him, I think more than Henry Smith.
Oh, okay.
Henry Smith, his old kickboxing coach. Cerrone's always worked with him, I think, more than Winklejohn. He's always had his own kind of thing going on.
Which explains why he doesn't strike like a Jackson Winklejohn.
He doesn't look like a Jackson Winklejohn fighter. His boxing was so much better than it ever had been against Patrick Cote. Can you still hear me? Are we still good? Having a moment of delay. People are probably hearing me right now, but you're freezing.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay, you can hear me? All right, we're caught up. Good. Hold on, I'm going to refresh this.
Okay, so Conor's talking about how Cerrone's boxing looked better than ever against Patrick Cote. I am agreeing. Now he's back. Go after it, Conor.
We okay? All right. Tons of lag out of nowhere there. Sorry. So much better against Patrick Cote. Donald Cerrone looked comfortable in the pocket. He was throwing combinations. He was advancing with punches, moving his head, moving his feet between shots. Everything was remarkably better. Mm-hmm. That gives me a lot of hope for Cerrone as a welterweight because over the past few years, he's put on a little more muscle. He's gotten more powerful. He has learned to use his wrestling, which I think is great. He's got a great ground game, and now he's knocking people out too. So, and to knock out Patrick Cote is a big thing. The reason I thought Cote could be the first welterweight to beat Cerrone is that he was a big guy who was durable. Big guy, durable. Cote's had a few scares with his chin in the recent years, but I still thought he was durable enough to take Cerrone shots. It turns out he wasn't. And his style wasn't right to take advantage of his size because Cerrone was a lot more comfortable of scaring him off when he did get into the pocket, so Cote was constantly fearing for his chin when he was coming forward. Rick Story has those advantages. He's a big guy, and he's durable, but he also has a lot of other advantages that Cote didn't. Not just as a fighter, but specifically as an opponent for Donald Cerrone. He has a southpaw, he's good at pressuring, and he rails the body. And those are all things that Cerrone has always had a tough time dealing with. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Cerrone beat Rick Story. The kicking, the boxing, he could pick Story off. Those improvements give him a much better chance than he would have had before. Yeah. But Story is probably going to weigh 15 or 20 pounds more than Cerrone in the cage. He's a big dude. And he has all these little stylistic wrinkles that might make him tough for Cerrone. I like Rick Story to win this one. Could go either way. I think it's a pretty close fight. I think it's a really well-matched fight, but I like Rick Story.
Yeah, and unlike Cote, Story has always been a very capable counter wrestler. Also because he's not a tall welterweight, he's got a very low center of gravity.
Yeah.
So he's a lot hard. Cote, part of the thing there is he's always been pretty or like lately at least, he's been reasonably easy to take down.
Story is easier to take down than you would want him to be as a wrestler, but he's a good scrambler. He's very difficult to hold down. And when he wrestles you, I mean, this is a guy who out-wrestled Johnny Hendricks. He has a very good offensive wrestling game.
Yeah.
Very stifling.
And I don't think Cerrone can have that kind of blanket success that Cote gave him, where it was just like part of the story of the success of that fight was that Cote eventually had to realize like he just could not sit down on anything.
Yeah.
Because the moment he sat down on a shot, even if he hit Cerrone, he would get taken down.
Yep.
And Story is much more capable of just being a little muscle bowling ball that Cerrone can't get in low enough on, and that who can push Cerrone up against the fence. And we don't know how many body shots it'll take to put Cerrone away. Like, that's the thing, is that it can be like that Matt Brown fight. It's like, you know, how much better would Matt Brown have done if he had not crumpled the first time, you know, after like 2 hard body kicks?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know how deep into that Cerrone can go, because we know he's going to get hit a lot to the body if he gives Story any time at all.
Yeah. I mean, it won't be quite the same as like one big Anthony Pettis shin to the liver, but it'll be a lot of attention to that body from Rick Story, and that's never a good thing for Cerrone.
Yeah, so I have to pick Story here, but I would love to see Cerrone put together like a really brilliant outside technical game and just pick him apart. Like I that would be so fun to watch.
My heart is with Story here. I'm a weird person, so I like Rick Story more than I like Donald Cerrone. I just have a weird affinity for him. I don't know. I just like Rick Story. I've always enjoyed seeing him fight. I would like, and I know Cerrone's coming into this like with the hype. Cerrone's the fan favorite. I would love to see Rick Story do what he did to Gunnar Nelson and get another satisfying upset win.
Yeah, I mean, I like both guys. This isn't a like thing. I think I would just be I would be really interested to see Cerrone counter that game. Like, I'd love to see the technical.
Yeah, it would mean a lot for his development if he was able to outdo Rick Story.
That's what would be really exciting to me, is to see him really actually make that leap of just like, here's a dude who's a stylistic nightmare for me. I'm going to take him apart.
Yeah.
Odds on this fight, Donald Cerrone is the favorite, -158 to -175. Rick Story, the underdog, +148 down to +125. I think Rick Story is worth a bet there at underdog odds.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, it's just a bad stylistic matchup for Cerrone.
Yeah, it's for some reason it still feels like a tough fight for me to call. Maybe it's because I was so surprised by how well Cerrone did against Cote. I expected that one to be closer. But yeah, I mean, I really do feel like
I did not. In my own defense, I picked Cerrone pretty cleanly in that fight.
I picked him, but I was worried that it was like Cote's a former middleweight. He's a big dude. He hits hard. This is like the first time that Cerrone has to fight a big welterweight.
The big thing that had me picking Cerrone and makes this difficult, I think, is when I watched tape on Cerrone getting ready for that fight. What stood out to me more than anything was how able Cerrone is to understand when he's in a bad position and work to get away from that position. Mm-hmm. In a way that, like, watching it with Cote, he just didn't. Like, Cote puts himself in trouble, and he'll just like, well, I guess I'm marching back into trouble. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, every time he came into the pocket, he kept getting tagged while standing up and just, like, walking back out, and he kept doing it over and over again. But Story's not going to do that, man. Like, Story's an underrated technician. He's as tough as Cote used to be. Yep. I mean, nobody just eats Tarek Safadine's hardest head kicks right to the chin and doesn't even
and that's why I'm picking Story here, is just because he's so fucking tough, and he's gonna, like, the bad positions that he's going to put Cerrone in are just kind of poisonous. So I don't know, but I would be really happy to see Cerrone win it. I'm just a little surprised that he's favorite, but he's been looking great lately, so I'm not that shocked.
Nobody cares about Rick Story, that's why. Cerrone's a fan favorite. People are going to put money on him because they like him. Nobody gives a damn about Rick Story.
Yep. All right. That brings us to the light heavyweight bout: Anthony Johnson versus Glover Teixeira.
Why does every Anthony Johnson fight feel like a two true outcome fight? It always feels like Anthony Johnson knocks somebody out or his opponent.
Remember what I said about calling Hyun-Gyu Lim a power monster?
Anthony Johnson's he's like 5 evolutions beyond that.
He is final form power monster.
Yeah, he's blue eyes, white power monster. That's him.
Yeah.
The thing is with this matchup is that I can totally see Teixeira outworking Johnson down the stretch, using his wrestling, getting him on the ground. Johnson still has those flaws, I think, that he had early in his career. They may be worked on over time. They may be better now than they were, but as far as we know, he's still susceptible to guys exhausting him on the floor, sapping his energy, and submitting him.
He's still susceptible to being panicked.
Yes, he loses confidence. And Anthony Johnson's an amazing defensive wrestler if he feels like he's in charge. If he doesn't, then he starts to have trouble with everything. He starts, I think, to, and it doesn't help when Henry Hooft is in the corner screaming at him not to freak out and not to quit. Henry Hooft's favorite catchphrase. Henry Hooft needs a T-shirt that says "Don't quit." That's what he needs. Because
don't quit, and I'm talking about you, Anthony Johnson. You quitter, do not quit on me.
Yeah. It's like, don't be a pussy, Anthony, on the back. Don't quit, Anthony. It's just all this stuff that's the wrong thing to say to someone who knows that they have a tendency to quit. The fortunate thing for Johnson in this fight is that, unlike a lot of the others, I feel like the odds here are 80% Johnson gets a big win or dominates, and 20% he gets taken. Maybe 75-25, 70-30. I just think that Glover Teixeira is not fast enough, not agile enough, not defensively sound enough, and not that good of a wrestler that he's going to be able to play the Daniel Cormier game against Anthony Johnson. Whereas I think that, I favored Ryan Bader more than I'm favoring Glover Teixeira. The only difference being that, because Bader's a better wrestler than Teixeira. Bader's wrestling is top-notch.
And a better athlete.
Sure, but the difference here is that Teixeira takes a shot better than Bader. Yep. So I think Teixeira will last longer. I think he will therefore have more opportunities if Johnson does get a big shot early, but I think his skill set is less capable of dominating Johnson the way Bader's could have or the way Cormier's did. So I like Anthony Johnson by second round TKO.
The biggest reason I'm picking, the big thing seeing, I can see this fight, is not Bader, but Glover is going to wade in looking for this 1-2 hook entry into potentially a clinch or just more 1-2 hooks that he loves. And
he's got about 3 punches that he throws.
Yeah, he's got about 3 punches. So it's
right hand uppercut, left hook.
Yeah.
It's basically it.
And he loves to come in with the left hook, right hand, left hook. Just the swarm of hooks entering. And he tries very hard and with a lot of success to really time people, to get them to miss on something and then to come back with a short hook.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with that is, I can just see him waiting and trying to time it and just get in that way that Anthony Johnson just train wrecked Daniel Cormier early and train wrecked Alexander Gustafsson early. If you're trying to wait and see what Anthony Johnson's going to do early in the fight, he's probably just going to run you the fuck over. Yeah. You know? You really kind of have to you really kind of have to find ways to flummox Anthony Johnson.
I think it would be really effective if Teixeira came out and pressured the hell out of Johnson, because Johnson likes to pressure. He likes to counter, but he likes to be the one pushing the pace and controlling the location. I think if Teixeira came out and made Johnson fight with his back to the cage, took a few shots and answered with counters, that would quickly erode Rumble's confidence. But I'm not confident that he is going to do that.
No, I just think that Rashad Evans, who last fought Teixeira, Johnson he doesn't have any problems pulling the trigger. So if you're watching and like, okay, when's he going to pull the trigger? He's just going to pull the trigger a lot.
Yeah.
And like, Rashad, as we've seen these days, he's much more like he's just going to circle and circle and wait. And you're like, well, when's he going to throw a punch? By the time he actually does, his opponent's been waiting and anticipating it so long that they're just ready. They just move out of the way, throw something back. And Johnson's not that dude. He's really not. And the only person to beat him recently, confidence issues included, is Daniel Cormier. Like, that's it. You have to go all the way back to his loss to Vitor Belfort, which was a weird fucking fight, if you actually remember that fight.
Classically Anthony Johnson weird, but weird even for him.
Yeah. Otherwise, even Andrei Arlovsky, like, fighting... I don't want to say that Andrei Arlovsky is like a parallel for Glover Teixeira, but even a much larger dude who throws a limited, like, similar striking arsenal had no success against Rumble playing that game. And I don't see Glover having success with that.
Mm-hmm.
So Anthony Johnson by knockout, probably sometime early. That seems like a pretty fair assessment to me. Odds on this fight, Johnson is the favorite, -186 to -250. Glover Teixeira, the underdog, +190 to +155. I feel a little bit like that's kind of people wanting Anthony Johnson to be worse than he is. I see Anthony Johnson as more like a 250 to 300 kind of favorite here.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we're seriously talking one loss to Daniel Cormier in like the past 5 years.
Yeah.
This is
tough,
not somebody.
Because I know that old Anthony Johnson is in there. Like I really know it's in there.
Saw it with the Cormier fight. It came out. It was on full display in that Cormier fight. But that
was Daniel Cormier. Yeah.
It wasn't there for Andrei Arlovsky. It wasn't there for Phil Davis. It wasn't there for Jimmy Manuwa. It wasn't there for Ryan Bader. It wasn't there for Alexander Gustafsson. And Glover Teixeira just feels like, I don't know. I don't see it. So that brings us to our main event, the welterweight rematch. Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor 2. And I love this fight. I love it more now that we were post water bottle. Like, that feels like we have like Diaz, McGregor 2, pre and post water bottle, and the build up post water bottle is so much more fun. Man, it's really hard not to like. There's no outcome for this fight that isn't chaos. That's one of the things that's great about it. Like, Conor McGregor wins, we get a future trilogy. We get the Conor McGregor show is back in the UFC, which is got to be the first and last thing the UFC wants. Is the Conor McGregor show, and if Conor McGregor loses, you kind of have the wheels fully coming off the Conor McGregor show, and that's also got to be the first and last thing the UFC wants. It's like, oh, great, we don't have to bend to any more of his whims and willfulness. Oh, wait, he's not going to sell 1 million pay-per-views for us again in the near future.
Yeah.
I mean, McGregor, like, his camp suddenly, like, discovering game planning. And seeing,
I don't know how true that is. I really feel like McGregor he has specific things in mind for each opponent.
Yeah, I assume that they have seen their opponents fight before, and they have this.
I kind of think the notion is more revolutionary to Kavanaugh than it was to McGregor.
That could be,
like that, because John Kavanaugh's always been about his like style without style thing. McGregor has not. McGregor doesn't look like any other SBG fighters,
No. or rather, every SBG fighter looks like the palest imitation of McGregor.
Yeah, right. Like they just try to pick up some of his tricks because they spend time with him.
Yeah. But the thing I would say is different that I'm seeing this time that I haven't seen. I'm seeing McGregor working with his striking coach, where he's actually sitting down. Like there's footage of him in it, like even in embedded and stuff in like the end of his recent camps, where it's just like, okay, we're watching Nate Diaz, we're watching him fight, we're watching what he's throwing. All right, let's stand up and let's work on how do we move around that combination. And that, to me, feels like the kind of thing that he may not have been doing at all. Like, he may have had the level of, like, okay, we know he's going to box, so I'm confident in my boxing, or I know he's going to wrestle, let's work on some counter wrestling, or things like that.
Sure.
But the actual approach of, let's actually sit down and watch tape and actually prepare specifically for what this person does, that may be the new part. Like, and that... You know, Conor McGregor is not a dumb fighter. He's not. He's not an error-prone fighter who just is some guy out of how fighting works. So I have a lot of faith in his ability to pick that up. I don't see this as being just, well, I expect the same thing. He's going to march forward and be dumb, and Conor McGregor is who he is. That said, I'm not sure how much faith I have in his ability to win a boxing game, and I feel like that's still what he wants to win. Like, I feel like more than ever, that is what he wants to prove.
Yeah. He wants to undo the first fight.
Yeah, he wants to undo the first fight, and he wants to outbox Nate Diaz. Like, what I'm seeing in this, in this footage is him looking at Nate Diaz's boxing game and being like, how can I dissect this? How can I solve it? How can I pick it apart? And I don't know if he actually has the ability to do that, because a lot of actually picking apart Nate Diaz's boxing and Nick Diaz's boxing is being able to match their pace effectively round after round.
Well, and a lot of beating a Diaz is not boxing with them.
It's not boxing with them. Like, yeah, nobody
it's
really. The functional way to beat them has been a kicking game and, frankly, a wrestling game.
Yeah,
has been forcing them.
Whether pace or skill set, the way to beat a Diaz is usually not to fight their fight.
Yeah, and it's actually a lot of it's been down to actually forcing them to rely on their grappling that they love and they promote so heavily, and be like, okay, out grapple me. So, get me on, or I'm going to put you on your back. I want you to actually have to submit me, because if you can't, I'm just going to beat you up from top control for round after round while you're willing to accept being on the ground. That's how Ben Henderson did it. That's how GSP did it. And then the other successes we've seen, that's even a lot of how RDA did it, with a lot of kicking mixed in. And I don't see Conor McGregor willing to do that. I don't see his pride being willing to do that. I think the coaching, the technical coaching and the technical game planning that they want out of this fight is for Conor McGregor to go in and solve Nate Diaz's boxing.
Yeah.
And if they're going to do that, I think he's going to fail. So I have to pick Nate Diaz.
Yeah. I think the thing I know that Conor McGregor is an intelligent man.
Yeah.
I know that. I know that he can adapt to an opponent, and I have absolutely no doubt he will come into this fight with some different things in mind. Mm-hmm. Having made some adjustments, he's focused really, really heavily on Diaz specifically as an opponent since their last fight, and he's been basically training nonstop since March. So I think that'll happen. The thing is, I think that even looking at what what Nate Diaz does well, I don't know that Conor McGregor can beat his own personality. Like, I think the first fight, it was McGregor falling into a pitfall. It was McGregor chasing after Diaz, just from a mental standpoint, really wanting to hurt him with the left hand, feeling that this guy wasn't prepared and that he was going to knock him out in the first round, and not being used to the fact that he could land the volume of clean shots he landed and not have somebody go away. And there's a moment in that fight where you can see Nate Diaz feel that Conor McGregor's power is leaving, and he instantly turns it around. And to me, if I'm Conor McGregor, I've said this many other places, but if I'm Conor McGregor, the scariest thing to me is not that Nate Diaz was able to capitalize when I tired. It's that when he was interviewed after the fight, he very calmly and certainly told John Anik that he expected it to happen way later in the fight. That's the scary thing, is that Nate Diaz is like, yeah, I didn't expect it to happen so soon, but I knew he was going to get tired and I turned it around. And that was Nate Diaz with 1 week of training. And I think that, like, the pitfall of being Conor McGregor mentally is that you expect to knock someone out, and then you go and you're like, all right, maybe I won't knock him out, so I'm going to do all this. And even then, you're not seeing that maybe you're not looking at the fight as an impartial observer. You're still looking at it as the guy who failed to knock him out the first time. So you're going to come in like, all right, how do I knock him out? Or how do I outbox him? Like, you're still caught up in your own confidence and your own ego. And I think that's going to be tough for Conor McGregor to come in here. And then just from a technical perspective, I don't think he necessarily has the skills to do what it would take to beat Nate Diaz the way other people have. I don't think he's a very hard kicker. He's not a great wrestler. We saw how that worked out last time when he went for a fatigued desperation takedown. He's okay on the ground, but has a fairly limited understanding. He doesn't have the skill set that other people have. And not even Josh Thompson. He's not even as dexterous a kicker as Josh Thompson. And I don't think he's as comfortable fighting out of orthodox as Josh Thompson was. So he can't set up the head kicks the same way. He's mostly a southpaw fighter. And
part of it too is I don't think that he's a good flashy kicker, but I don't know that he's as good as stable. He's a good stable kickboxer in combination. Like,
he's not a power kicker at all.
Yeah.
He's not going to land like a thudding low kick after a 2-punch combo. It's like he's going to flit in and out and throw quick punches and then roll under and get back out. He's going to constantly be resetting. And the thing is I'm making it sound like Conor McGregor can't win this fight, and that is absolutely not true. Like, I do think this is still a closely matched fight. He landed a lot of very good shots on Nate Diaz. I don't think Nate was as close to being done at any point as Conor says he was. Whether Conor believes it or not, I'm not sure.
Nothing is as close to the truth as what Conor says it is. The only time that he's ever been as close to right as he says he was is when he fought Jose Aldo, and that was just a terrible, heart-wrenching thing to watch.
Everything he says, because it's promotion, it's absolutes.
Yeah.
But like Conor McGregor, I think there's a very distinct possibility he could stop Nate Diaz on cuts. Just coming in with a little more patient game plan, he really busted up Nate's fight in the face in the first fight. He could do it again. He could really fight patiently and counter Nate and make him come forward. I'm not sure he can beat him doing that, but it would probably be better than chasing after him desperately. Those are possibilities. But from a technical standpoint, if Nate can keep from being knocked out, if he can keep from being sliced up, then he is a better matchup for a southpaw than Conor McGregor is for another southpaw. Nate has fought very well against southpaws throughout his career. He's fought a lot of them, actually. RDA he had trouble with. Ben Henderson he had trouble with. But let me actually pull up his Wikipedia and see who else he's fought. He fought Jim Miller and destroyed him. He fought hold on a second. Michael Johnson, of course, destroyed him. Conor McGregor, I guess, counts. He fought Takanori Gomi, who is at times a southpaw. He's fought a lot of left-handers. And even the ones he's lost to, that still counts for overall experience. And he's probably spars with Nick Diaz in the gym, who is a very aggressive southpaw. And so Nate Diaz knows how to fight like an orthodox fighter against someone in his stance. He knows how to keep his jab busy. He knows how to occupy their vision and set up the rear hand. He knows how to pivot off to the side after throwing it. Everything Conor McGregor has learned to do from his own experience, is designed to beat southpaws. He's never had any meaningful experience against a left-hander. Really, like the only meaning he could draw from his fight with Dustin Poirier is that he could blow somebody up with the left hand. He didn't have to go in there and fight a tactical battle with Poirier. So pretty much Conor McGregor's been taking away from his fights that he can do the same tactics he's always been doing and that he can knock everyone out. And I just don't think that's going to work against Nate Diaz. The guy has a more educated lead hand. He's not easy to put away. And if you get into a fight where you're trying to put him away, then you're probably going to end up getting put away yourself. I don't think Nate Diaz is a great fighter. I don't think he's a true great. But I think he's a tough stylistic matchup for Conor. And I think to beat Nate, it's not necessarily proof that Conor is great, but I think he probably has to be a really great fighter to beat Nate, just because he has to be able to overcome some essential limitations of this fight. So yeah. I like Nate Diaz. I think it'll be a submission late in the fight.
The other thing I would say, too, in Conor's, unfortunately for Conor, perhaps, is that what I've seen out of his grappling and wrestling games is a fighter who's very focused on punishment over control. A great athlete who's very focused on punishment over control. So when he does something, it's with that instant idea of, how can I hurt you really badly? Or
that's kind of his whole game. Like, even on the feet is like, he's going to let you move away from his left hand and then lace you across the chin as you think you're exiting his range. That's his whole thing, is like letting you move so that he can keep hitting you.
And so with, you look at how, like, beating Diaz with a wrestling game, it is hyper control focused.
Yeah.
Like, because they're hard to hurt. They're impossible to submit, and they're hard to hurt. So if you're going to beat them with a grappling game or with a wrestling game, you have to be incredibly focused on control. And I don't think, the Max Holloway fight aside, Max Holloway just is not that kind of grappler or wrestler, or wasn't at the time. And otherwise, I've never seen Conor McGregor just be like, I can take you down and control you here for large amounts of time. I'm going to take you down and I'm going to try to hurt you really quickly, and then I'm going to reset and get back to space, which is where I want to be and where I'm comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so without that control, I don't see the evolution of the how to beat Diaz game plan.
Yeah. He could come in there. Like, Conor McGregor is a really special fighter. I think he's probably will go down as a true all-time great. He could come in there and outbox Nate Diaz. Like, that is definitely a distinct possibility. I just haven't seen it yet. And I think even if he does go in there and outbox Nate has more fallbacks than Conor McGregor does. Like, he's tough enough. He can take Conor against the fence and hold him there and wear him out. He's done that a lot, actually, to a lot of fighters. He's not bad in the clinch, just like his brother Nick. And he's got the ground game to fall back on. And I think being a guy more suited to this weight, he's probably a little more durable. Nate Diaz is used to getting hit by guys that probably hit about as hard as Conor McGregor. Mm-hmm. And Conor McGregor is not really used to getting hit by – he's not used to having the fight slip away from him when the other guy can take his shots. Like, he can take a clean shot. He took some hard punches from Chad Mendes. Yeah. But much like Anthony Johnson, that was because he still felt like he was in charge in that fight. Like, he still knew that Chad Mendes was tired. He still knew that he was wearing him down. He still knew that he could knock him out at any point. There came a point in the Nate Diaz fight in the second round at 196. He hit Nate Diaz with his best shots and then chased after him, desperate for the finish, couldn't get him out of there, and Nate Diaz came back harder than ever. That broke him mentally. That's what exhausted him. So I don't know if he can overcome it. I love this fight, and I don't want to – like, I've been called many things, and apparently I'm now just like a Nate Diaz nut hugger because I think Nate Diaz is amazing and all of this. But we all knew going into the –
fuck?
We all knew going into the first fight that Nate would be a tough matchup for Conor with a full camp. And I think most of us picked Conor because we're like, well, Nate only has 11 days and he's not ready. Yeah. Conor's going to come in there. He's been training. He's at the top of his form. Now we get to see Nate come in there with a full camp. Granted, Conor has the advantage of having been beaten by him before, so he knows what not to do. But I'm just not entirely confident that McGregor can avoid doing it, and I'm not confident at all that what he will choose to do instead will actually be the right approach. So, Nate Diaz, 209, bitch.
Yep. On that note, Conor McGregor minus 135. Those Irish do love to gamble. I'm assuming that's what's pushing it because I don't know anybody picking Conor McGregor flat out.
I don't think it would be a mistake. Again, I don't want to give the impression that this is like a one-sided pick here.
No,
like,
it's not. But
could
Conor
totally
McGregor
win.
as the favorite.
It does seem strange.
In a fight he lost against somebody on 11 days' notice.
It does seem strange.
Yeah. Nate Diaz is the underdog, plus 115 to minus 110. So it's not a widespread by any measure, but might still be worth a nickel on Nate Diaz at plus 115.
I bet on Nate Diaz. I also bet on the fight to go over 2.5 rounds, which is currently at underdog odds across the board.
Wow. Well, yeah. Okay. Let's see. Over 2.5 rounds.
I think the
fight starts round 3 is minus 125.
Yeah, I think the very first thing Conor McGregor took away from that first fight is that he cannot get exhausted so easily again. He's been doing a shitload of cardio and a ton of sparring. I think he's going to be a little more comfortable. He's going to be a lot harder to tire out. And he may come in with a game plan that allows him to conserve his energy more from one round to the next. So I think it's probably a dead cert that this one goes longer than...
There are a shit ton of prop bets on this.
Yeah.
There's a significant strikes prop bet for who has the most significant strike.
Really?
Yep. Diaz plus 110, McGregor minus 150. Yeah. It's the first time I've ever seen that.
Diaz has more takedowns. McGregor has more takedowns.
Plus 162, plus 240. So...
very interesting. Oh, either fighter is stopped by doctor or corner. Plus 1,600 could happen, man. I think Conor McGregor may actually go in there hoping to cut Nate Diaz's face up. Yeah, might not be the worst thing he's ever thought of. All right, on that note, I think it's time to close the show. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Conor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give this video a thumbs up over on YouTube. That's this button, like, whatever, down below. That helps us a ton. Subscribe to MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM. That's our YouTube channel. That's where all our latest videos come out. I need to figure out a 6th round. You going to be around for a 6th round after this? Or are you going to be doing... I'm actually not even going to be able to watch it live. I'm going to a concert that night, so I have to do some Sunday morning viewing. I may do a 6th round solo, and then after that, we'll be getting everybody ready for UFC on Fox Maya vs. Condit. So that'll be next week with all the normal shows for that. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.